Hi, you are listening to a career advice webinar by the Royal Australian Chemical Institute, the professional association for chemists in Australia. I'm Dave Sammett, coordinator of the RACI mentoring program. Now, recruitment is a tough process at the best of times, and right now the job market is just about as bad as it has been any time in nearly a century. So with companies receiving hundreds of job applications per ad, what makes a successful application? In this webinar, we have a panel of experts talking about the insights in what's involved in the screening and selection processes. We'll discuss how you can better your application and increase your chance of being selected. The webinar is free and everyone is welcome. I am extraordinarily delighted to welcome so many people to this webinar. And participants throughout the event, you will have the opportunity to ask questions. There is a Q&A option there, and I will also try and keep an eye on the chat. So tonight I am joined by two excellent panelists, both of whom work directly with recruitment. Jovana Sobat is team leader at CS Executive Recruitment down in Melbourne, and Emma Chung, scientific recruitment consultant at Evolve Scientific in Brisbane.
Hi everyone.
Now, it's worth noting that CS Executive runs a program called UniWorks. It supports graduate students to access part-time work by matching them with leading organisations in the STEM sector to learn technical skills, and here's the critical words, while getting paid. You can find a link to that in our careers page, which is temporarily hosted on the website of our sponsor, DCS Technical. So that's www.dcstechnical.com.au. And if you look through the careers section, we've got a huge number of resources that are all available for free. Evolve Scientific has been a friend to the RACI mentoring program for a number of years, and you can find an interview with one of Evolve's co-founders in our podcast series, which again is also freely available. So, Emma and Jovana, let's start. And actually, I'm just going to move my questions off to the side where I can more easily see them. Okay, so let's start by talking about your roles as recruiters. What are the key drivers of your job, and how does that affect your interactions with job seekers? Emma, do you want to start?
Sure. So I think it helps to sort of start by understanding that we're a service provider. So we have an obligation to meet what our clients are asking for, and to meet their needs to find the right people for the jobs that they need to fill. So it all comes down to providing top quality candidates to great organisations and great companies. So we tend to take a lot of care with our candidates, because without candidates we are unable to supply to our clients. But it's worth understanding that the client's brief, which you will see in the form of a job ad and a selection criteria, is something that we're always striving to meet. And that kind of, in a nutshell, is what it's all about, I guess.
Absolutely. Jovana?
Yeah, I guess not to repeat what Emma said, needing to understand what our client needs and matching candidates available. We love to see our clients' businesses grow as a result of our contribution. So we are a service provider, but candidates are our product. So we love to learn about our people, to understand what their skills are, how we can help them showcase their skills through their resumes or through their interview techniques. Candidate care definitely, is our primary focus.
It actually probably raises an interesting unscheduled question, because so early in the piece. How does your role differ from the HR person within the company, or the direct boss recruiting for themselves?
Well, in terms of HR, there's a big difference. With a lot of the companies, HR people come from either finance or psychology or those sort of branches, and they might not have any idea about science, about the technicality of the role. So for us, it's easier to pick up the relevant skills in a resume, because we are scientists and all of us have come from the industry. So we'll understand, what quality control is, what a lab tech would do, what product development is. If you apply directly to a company and it goes to a HR person, if you don't put all of the keywords, they might just not shortlist you. So that's one of the biggest differences between a HR person of a company and a scientific recruiter. Emma, would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the other thing to remember is that the HR manager in a scientific organisation, or even the hiring manager who's the lab manager who does know the technical stuff, they're too busy being a lab manager or an HR manager dealing with performance management and conflict issues. So our function is to really alleviate some of that stress and provide a service very quickly. And using our expertise, as Jovana said, is really bringing in the technical expertise to find the real match in the scientific space.
Absolutely. So what do you love about your job then, Emma?
Oh, everything. I think scientists, we're all sort of nerds at heart, and I think even Jovana used the word earlier. So I'm definitely in that space. I love all things science, and being a recruiter combines, working with people, with science. So I speak to people from all fields of science day to day. So I'm always learning. You're able to help people, and comparing it to working in a lab where sometimes you'd be on your own for hours at a time, and in this job you're always with people. So that's definitely what I really enjoy the most.
Yeah, definitely. Meeting new people constantly, dealing with clients with new challenges, new roles, helping them build their teams, and then candidates I've placed 5 years ago are now managers, and
Yes.
they've grown into these people that are hiring people. It's really exciting. They're contributing to manufacturing, to academia, to research. It's definitely good.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, somebody's asked, is this just marketing for recruitment services? The answer is absolutely not.
No.
This is very much a careers-based webinar, and just the role of the recruitment consultant. It's an important, for the whole careers process, just for the person who's asked, the whole careers process, the key thing you have to understand is how the system works. If you understand how the system works, you're going to be significantly more successful in getting through the system. All right. So if you understand what the pressures are in any business negotiation, if you understand what the pressures and needs of the person across the table from you are, then you're far more likely to get a successful deal out of it. And that's what we're trying to do here. So you're trying to strike a business deal that results in you providing services and you getting paid. Okay, that's what we're talking about. Okay, so that brings us fairly neatly then. Jovana, what makes a star candidate in your eyes?
Oh, the first thing that always, to me, is attention to detail. I can't stress that enough. So reading the job ad and then doing the selection criteria throughout the resume. Not just that, but spelling mistakes. You're a scientist, you're applying for these roles, and the first thing we'll pick up is, a spelling mistake. You have to give it to someone else to read it. If you've read it too many times and you've missed it. It's, attention to detail, addressing the selection criteria, understanding, what the job is about that you're applying for, not sending generic resumes. I guess putting, being open for communication for me. I'll be very quick. I'll write an email. I'll say, thank you for your application. I'd like to speak to you, to email you. Can you provide this? And then if it's going to take you 2 days to come back to me or not answer my phone call, then you're not a star candidate. So a few of those things, I think.
Emma?
Oh, look, speaking with some of our clients, it sort of comes down to a few key factors. So everything Jovana just said is absolutely applicable, but I sort of see, particularly in science, we really need to see the passion, a genuine passion for the industry, the job, wanting to contribute. Capability is obviously a big one. Graduates, don't stress, your capabilities are in different forms, but also being really reliable, because in this day and age, reliability is waning, I guess. So and add to that, absolutely, attention to detail is critical, and as scientists, it's something that we learn from day one, basically.
Now, we've had a question from the floor, and I think it's a very interesting question, because I think it speaks to a fundamental misunderstanding of what the recruitment process involves. Now, this person has said, why do you make applicants waste immense amounts of time writing key selection criteria? If the recruiter can't judge my skills based on my CV, isn't that their shortfall and not mine? Now, I'll make this one comment, but I'd be very interested to see what you guys have to say here. Is basically, I think people need to understand that there's two steps to recruitment. There's before you get the interview and after you get the interview. Before you get the interview, the resume and cover letter process is not about getting you into the job. It's preventing you from getting excluded from the job. When we as recruiters, and I don't mean recruitment consultants, I mean anyone in HR, I'm not a recruiter, I'm an employer. But when I have 100 plus resumes in front of me and I need to narrow that down to at most 3 candidates that I'm going to interview, the first steps I'm doing are seeking to exclude as many people as possible, as quickly as possible, so that I can get down to the gold nuggets and interview them. So if you're making me work to figure out if you're a good fit, you're not a good fit. Okay.
Agree. So when this person asks about the selection criteria, do they mean in the cover letter, or?
I imagine that what they're talking about, I mean, not many people list selection criteria and expect that in the cover letter / thing. I mean, that's more government than private industry.
Yeah, and look, I honestly, and that's going to come up later, I don't really go to cover letters first. I go to a resume. So I expect you to address the selection criteria within the resume.
Yeah. We will come to those, so we'll get to that step afterwards. But yeah, I think you just do need to understand what the role of the resume and cover letter is. It's not to get you the job; it's to keep you in the running.
Yeah, it's a good perspective.
It's probably, we'll jump to that question right now. When you receive an application, the first time that you're looking at an application for a job, how many seconds do you give that resume?
I think we're here in our podcast. He mentioned about 30 seconds, and I have to agree. Sometimes possibly even less. 1 to 2 minutes for higher level executive or specialized roles, maybe. And if you consider how quickly some of us can read, that's actually quite a lot of time. So when we have 120 plus applications, 30 seconds is probably quite accurate. So that first page really needs to get you on that list of people that I want to call, or prevent you from being off that list, as Dave has said.
Yeah, and that's what Yovana said before about mistakes and spelling errors and things like that, because recruitment is all about the behaviours. The best predictor of your future behaviour is your past behaviour. If your past behaviour, as demonstrated by your resume, that you are careless, then that says to me as a recruiter that you're going to be careless when you work for me.
Yeah.
Right? Now, the questions are coming in thick and fast, and I'm not sure we're going to be able to get to them all, but we will try and get through. We're going to try and step through this whole process logically. So the first step is the job ad, okay? Yovana, what do you want a candidate to see when they read the job ad that you've written? What do you want them to really understand?
Yeah, first of all, I want them to understand what the industry the job belongs to that they're applying for. That will right away tell them if they're suitable or not. I want them to understand the key responsibilities of the role. Is this a lab tech role, QC, R&D, project manager role? I guess, seniority of the role. Are they too experienced or are they not experienced enough? So those 3 key things, if they can figure out, okay, so this job is in the pharmaceutical industry, it's an entry-level role and I've got 15 years or I'm at that level. And this is what I'd be doing. Do I have the skills for this? Then I've done my job well, for them to understand those 3 key things, for them to be able then to put together a decent application.
Absolutely. Emma?
Oh, look, I absolutely agree. We want candidates to want to apply for a job. So the job ad has to be appealing to them, and it also has to help them to understand what the client's needs are going to be so that they can ensure that they're going to get on those lists. So you know, why the job is available, what you're going to be responsible for, are you going to align with the needs. The meeting our clients' needs is important, but the candidate is really important too, because and it comes later possibly about the people who are too experienced. So we need to ensure that our candidates are well fitted to a role as well for the long term, not just for a short term period.
Absolutely. But it's a key aspect. What you say, they have to be a good fit. The candidate has to want more than a job. They have to want this job. And part of the job of the job ad, or part of the task of the job ad, is to help the candidate decide, is this a good fit for me?
Yeah.
Right?
Definitely.
It's interesting to note, neither of you said, I actually put a little ticking bomb in every single one of my job ads. So when I advertise, I always say, for a scientific role, I always say AAS experience preferred. So I got distracted because I just saw a comment. I say AAS experience preferred. And the reason I put it in is not because I care whether you've got AAS experience. I can teach you to run an AAS in a day. The reason I put it in is it's because it's a behavioural marker. I'm often advertising for less experienced people that I can train up. And when a young person or a less experienced person who's fairly new out of university calls me and said, well, I don't have any AAS experience, but I studied it at university, I say, great, tell me how it works. And most of the time they will say to me, oh, I'd have to go back to my books and check. And to me, that's your behavioural marker. You didn't have the get up and go and check before you talk to me. You're not the right fit for my business, right? You're not invested enough in wanting this job.
And that's the thing with the selection criteria. I think if your answer is no to one of the selection criteria, you don't meet it, that's fine, but tell us how you would address that shortcoming. Did you have knowledge of it? Have you researched it recently? Explain to us what you do when you aren't able to meet something, because this is a task that happens in the workforce. What happens when you approach a barrier? Do you give up and stop? Do you seek help? Do you take initiative? It's all an assessment, I guess, tool.
Yeah. And we're getting to, assessing the application, but one of the key aspects is if a candidate can show to me that they've done their due diligence, that they've done their research, they've analysed the job ad, they've done their research about me and my company, and they can articulate why they want to work in this role for me, it makes them a standout candidate.
Absolutely.
100%.
Right? Because I want, I say to every single one of my staff, I say, I want you to want to work for me 10 years from now.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And the only way that's going to happen is if I offer you support and growth and all that sort of stuff. But it has to start with the principle that we want to form a long-term business relationship.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Yvonne, what's your initial method for shortlisting candidates when you receive hundreds of CVs for a position? What's your record, by the way? Most number of applications for a single job ad?
Oh, it'd be the graduate roles, and it'd be over 350, I'd say. Yeah.
My record was 454.
Oh, wow.
For a graduate chemist role.
And look, to be honest, over time you learn, you get to know the candidates, applying within Australia. So when I just started, I was opening up every single application, and I still open most of them. But some names I know, and right away I'll know they're not suitable. But with graduates, if they're new, I open up every single resume. And when we said before we take 30 seconds to read a resume and someone made a comment, it's not that we read every word. You sort of skim through it. You look at, education, you look at, what they studied, where they worked. It's sort of a flow. And it gives you a really good idea. Then if it grabs your interest, then you read in detail. Yeah. So yeah, I'd still say I open up every single application. So that's how I start shortlisting. The obvious ones that are definitely wrong, I don't come back to them. So it's still a big job every time.
And it is interesting you talked about I get to know. Of course, one of the big traps when you're applying for a larger company or with a recruitment consultant is if you apply for 10 different roles that are massively different, from junior to senior, and you spray your resume, and it's the same bloody resume for all 10 roles, you're going to be immediately discounted as a time waster.
You do, and we have a lot of serial offenders like this, and sometimes I go and I open the resume hoping they would have changed something, and they don't. So customize your applications.
Oh, definitely. No, I've actually consoled somebody for quite a long time over the phone who'd experienced this. They'd been submitting over time, and we got to know their name. No effort was put in to address each individual job. And you have to remember, we're small recruitment agencies. We're not 100 people here. We don't have receptionists that answer the phone. It's us. We are the ones that look at all the resumes. And as Jovana said, we get to know the names. So to be impressive, you need to put the effort in to be seen to be serious about the jobs that you're applying for. Yeah.
Gosh, we're getting so many questions. Wow. I almost, next time I might need a moderator to help me sift through the questions. I think the other thing is, again, consider that what the application is from a behavioural standpoint. You need to treat the job application, your resume and cover letter, as a job in itself. If you're not demonstrating the attributes of a good worker by putting the effort into the job application, you're also saying to the potential employer, I'm not displaying good worker behaviours.
Yeah.
Right? I you know, again and again, we see this. The person who was in the newspaper said, I've sent in 1,000 applications and I've not had a single interview. And it's because they've sent in 1,000 rubbish applications.
Yes.
And to get the interview, you have to be in the top few percent. If you keep putting in that low level one again and again and again, you're never going to get to that top. You have to put the effort in to get there.
I think if you understand that putting an application in for a job, you're actually marketing yourself. So you're selling yourself to somebody. And if you think of big brands like Coca-Cola and that sort of thing, do you think they'd put a handwritten sign on the side of the road on a wooden pitchfork? Or they wouldn't, because they want to be the best in the world. And whilst I know I can't compare each individual to Coca-Cola, but that's I guess the distinction is you can either be the handwritten sign on the side of the road, or you can be the digital marketing sign that stands out and attracts attention.
Yeah, it's very well put. Very well put. Now, there's a couple of really interesting questions coming in here. I like this one. Is it true that if you find the right candidate, you stop looking at CVs even before the advertised close date?
No.
I can't speak for other recruiters, but you always want to impress your client and give them as much, to choose from. So you'd keep screening candidates and speaking to them if you get someone as amazing as a candidate you already have. And
as an employer, I keep checking resumes up till I'm ready to make an offer.
And I think the thing you have to remember is that we have a database. So we don't just hit that perfect match and stop. We look at all the skills and we like to grow our database with current candidates. So we never just stop. When we see somebody who's great, we might email them, we might call them and say, tell us more. We've got you formally registered. What are you looking for? And we've had this many a time where somebody's been the second, third, fourth in line for the job, and a month later we've found them something.
Yeah.
Going through an agency, it's multiple doors, so it's never just one rejection. It's multiple opportunities, really.
It is interesting. In my period when I was a recruitment consultant, I used to keep a grab bag of high quality candidates, and I would literally advertise them to my clients, not by name, but I would say, here are my 10-star candidates this month.
Yeah.
And most months, one or two of them, an employer would say, oh, they sound interesting, and I will get an inquiry. So probably once a month, I would pick up an extra job placement just by advertising my star candidates.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
It is very much worth, particularly with recruitment consultants, very much worth building your relationship with them, being a high quality candidate, whether it's this job or some other job. But you got to remember, the recruitment consultants getting paid by putting someone in a job. If they have someone ready to go in quickly, they get paid quickly, good for everybody.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Dave, there's a question there on the marketing that
Yeah.
Anne has put through. We're scientists, not marketers, and I absolutely agree. We're scientists. We're quirky. We can be introverted. None of us are professional job seekers. So I guess I'm not saying become a professional marketer. I'm just saying put the effort in to be distinguishable and at the top of the rung from everyone else. It's that lack of effort that is obvious, I guess.
Very nicely said, Emma. You're absolutely right. So then coming to the classic question, which is more important to you, the cover letter or the resume?
Well, I think I've touched on that. For
You
me,
have.
it's definitely the resume.
Right.
Yeah. Look, some of my clients love the cover letters, and because we're meeting our client needs, we will always make sure that we read those to make sure they're up to scratch for that client. Other clients are less focused on the cover letter. So the resume certainly is the document that can convey a lot more than what a one-page cover letter might. So yeah, really having that oomph factor in your resume will help. And there are tricks to update your resume very simply without it taking you 5 hours or days every time. So we definitely encourage you to do that. So the resume is, I think, probably to me 70 to 80% based on my clients and what they ask for.
Now it's interesting you say that because I'm exactly the opposite. I virtually don't read the resume.
Everyone's different. That's the problem.
Because the type of work that I do is so specialized that it's unlikely that any candidate will have experience in my field, right? My particular field, for those of you who are interested, is chloride hydrometallurgy, right? Obscure name, obscure work. And so for me, the cover letter is where I see the person who has flair, who has the ability to learn, the person who, I'm a small company, I can't afford a robot, I need somebody who is going to be entrepreneurial like me. And so for me, the cover letter is where all your personality comes out. The lesson that comes out of it is get them both right.
Definitely.
Yeah, and always have one. The lack of a cover letter probably also conveys that lack of effort. And again, there's tricks to make that process easier for a job hunter.
Okay. So what is important to include in an application that most people forget? It follows directly from where you were, Emma.
Yeah, I guess the why do you want the job? We get a lot of, obviously you're meeting the criteria and there's a lot of focus on just ticking those boxes and that sort of thing. There's a mentality with, not all, but some applicants of what can you do for me? The job process, I guess, is more about what are you offering and what can you do for the client or in that type of job. So the why do you want the job, bringing out that passion. Scientists are very passionate people and we all display that differently. So I'm sure if you sat down and spoke to somebody that knows you well, they would be able to draw out that passion that you have and articulate it for you if you're not good at writing, or at least help you to articulate that passion and just get it down on the paper there. So and show why. Why do you want the job? What can you do?
You're absolutely right. And a little tip for your cover letter is talk into your phone first. Don't write your cover letter, say your cover letter. Talk naturally the way that you talk. Because one of the things is so many, particularly scientists, feel the need to torture the language to get some sort of imagined formal English, and it makes them virtually unreadable. Write the way you talk. Just be yourself in your cover letter.
Yeah.
Now, a couple of very interesting questions. I love this one. So it's okay to submit tailored CVs to different jobs? Not only okay, strongly advisable.
Yeah. You must, yeah.
Okay. Now, somebody's asked, is it important to put our residential address in the resume? Does it make a difference if the job's advertised in Melbourne and the candidate's based in Brisbane?
Look, I have, yes, it is. Some of my clients have had bad experience relocating people. And they will just refuse to take someone from another state. Another thing is, it's important, if you live in Melbourne and you want to work in Sydney, I need to know how long it will take you to relocate. It doesn't matter. Maybe my client would happily take someone from Melbourne, but just for us to know the process, let's talk through. Do you have family, friends? Where will you live? How will you relocate? What does it mean for you? Do you have family to move with you? You know, we want to be supportive in the process. So it won't harm you if you put your residential address. It doesn't mean that it will stop you from getting the role, but it will be just easier on the process.
Definitely. And I think even conveying your appetite for interviewing in person at your own cost, or relocating at your own cost, because you're in competition with people that don't need that thing, and maybe the company doesn't have the money to invest into that. So in your cover letter or your resume, you can write it down. I'm happy to interview and relocate at my own cost.
Yeah.
That willingness is, yeah.
And if you're in Brisbane and you're looking for jobs in Melbourne, there's presumably a reason that you're doing so. You can simply articulate, look, I'm moving to Melbourne anyway, and therefore I'm looking for jobs down there. So don't worry about my address. I'm on my way down.
Yeah.
I have clients in Brisbane on the north side who refuse to take people from the south side because the toll bridge costs you $10 each day. And they've had people quit after a month or two because it's not worth the time or the fuel or the price. So as long as you show that willingness and convey it, write it down, as Dave said, write it in your own words, then that will come through and you're more likely to get that call if you're, open about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, somebody's asked, where was the international student question? Hang on, I'm just trying to find it. Give me one sec. I'm going to paraphrase because I can't see it right now. Oh, how impressive does a resume of an international student need to be to have a chance at being hired in a country that's not their home country?
Address the selection criteria, talk about the experience. Doesn't matter where you're from, but if you talk technical and if you address what the job is asking for, I don't think that would be a problem.
And it's about fit too. I mean, I'll hire an international student for a job that I need them for part-time work for the next 2 years. But if I'm hiring from a full-time job that's going to be a career position for the next 10 years, well, I can't consider an international student.
Oh yeah, that's definitely, if it's a full-time job, then unfortunately it's
so it's, as long as it's a good fit, then being an international student or otherwise shouldn't make any difference. In fact, sometimes I'm biased towards international students because I know they'll work their ass off to make good, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And plus, of course, if you're an international student, there's a decent chance you speak a different language, which most of us dumb Aussies don't.
Yeah.
So, and I certainly have in the past hired people, chosen, when I got down to the final candidates, I've chosen based on language.
Yeah, it can be a criteria, exactly, or a benefit. So.
Correct length for a resume.
I don't mind big resume. Sorry, Emma.
No, you're right. You go, yeah.
For me, it doesn't matter if it's 7 pages, 5, as long as I've got the relevant information in the first 2 pages. If you want to talk about your publications, about whatever you want for the rest of the 5-7 pages, great. I mean, we'll customize it before we send it to the client. As long as you've got what's needed to get my attention in the first 2 pages. I mean, really up to 5 pages, I think it's fine.
That's interesting. So you don't mind seeing publications?
I don't, especially if it's a research role, academia role, a government role, someone with a PhD, and I'm interested to know what they did during their PhD or postgrad. So I'd like to go through the publications, but they can always attach them in another document or a link to their publications. You know, people do it differently.
Emma, I'll ask you, but my general view is you have a resume for academic / government, and you have a resume for commercial industrial.
Definitely.
They're quite different. And I would not have, I would not be advertising too heavily that I'm a PhD with lots of publications when I'm going for a commercial industrial role.
Well, yeah. So again, it all boils down to that selection criteria and finding the best match. So, and selling yourself to be the best match. So if you're very academia based background, but you're going for a job in industry, which is routine, quality, all the sort of basics that might not be nearly as complex as what research incorporates, then certainly you need to market yourself a bit differently and sell yourself a bit differently. As Jovana said, it's all about where you put the information. So, and that's a common mistake we see with people coming from academia to transition to industry. They promote all their publications and papers very early, whereas what I want to know is, what technical skills did you gain? How does that translate into this job in industry? Why do you want this job, you know? So I guess those first couple of pages are really where you need to get in all of the valuable information and make somebody want to keep reading and give you a call.
Yeah. Okay. Circling back to overseas students, if you've got a foreign name, citizenship status, what's your advice there?
We were talking about this earlier. Jovana and I both have, I guess, multicultural names to an extent, and looking at us, you probably can't really pinpoint our cultural heritage, although mine might be a bit more obvious. But I always put my citizenship status because as recruiters or anyone in HR, we have to ensure that the candidate can fulfill the requirements of the job. And if the visa limits that requirement, then unfortunately we can't place you. So by putting it on there, it answers the question for the person reading a resume very quickly, and they don't have to then wonder about it.
Exactly. So. Don't leave us wondering.
Yes.
Yes.
Right, because leaving us wondering can read like evasiveness. And you don't want to be seen as evasive. You don't want to be seen as someone who can't be fully trusted.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's a little secret that we know in the recruitment side of things. People lie in their resume.
People lie.
Yeah.
So we're constantly looking out for deception. Would you not consider a candidate if they seem to have too much experience for the role?
Yes, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I think Emma mentioned earlier, every role has a certain fit, and every, either if it's a company, academia, or government, roles are segregated into levels of the skill that you need. So if it's an entry-level role that requires, 0 to 3 years of experience completing certain tasks, and bringing someone in who's got 15 years of experience, it won't be a good fit, in 5-10 years' time. Unfortunately, those people, either get bored, or they move on very quickly, or they're just unhappy, and it just creates environment that is not good for anyone. It's also a specification of our clients who come to us and say, I want a graduate, and they won't consider anyone else. So yes, you can be too senior for a role, because maybe you are overqualified, and a company doesn't want someone of that many years of experience.
Yeah. And I will say, I once sat an aptitude test for a job, and they said, no, you're too good. You'll be bored in the role.
Yeah, for that role.
In the end, I had to trust them.
Exactly.
They know the role better than I do.
Yeah, I think it all boils down to sort of a risk factor for a company too. So they're investing into their staff, and if you look at a job that requires 2 years, and if you profile somebody that has 2 years, the risk in bringing them on board is very low. You've probably got a lot to gain. If you look at somebody with 15 years, the risk is a bit higher because of the elements that Jovana mentioned is, are you going to stay there? Are you going to be passionate and enjoy what you do? Because it's not going to give you the responsibilities and the stimulation that a 15-year role will. So the risk becomes higher, and so the many people are risk averse generally. So that's where the appetite is swayed towards matching the criteria more appropriately.
And it's worth understanding, this ultimately is a business transaction, people, right? If I'm going to hire someone, by the time I've paid their salary while they get trained up, if I've recruited, the recruitment costs, if there's been recruitment, the government red tape, etc., I'm in the hole for $50,000. And so when you're pitching to me as an employer that you want me to employ you, you're basically saying, make an investment of $50,000 in me. And the only way that's going to work is if I'm going to get a return on that investment, that you're going to stay with me long enough. So I need to be satisfied that you're going to stay long enough for me to get that return on investment. Right? Now, somebody's asked a very interesting question. I've got 4 years of upper management experience in pharmaceutical companies. but all the jobs advertised are either entry level or want 10 years of experience. How should I deal with this situation?
I think, look, I would aim higher than lower. I think because the risk, if you profile that risk, and sorry, my background is in risk and quality. If you profile that risk, I'm sure with your 4 years of experience, you could sell yourself as somebody with close to that, depending on the nature of the environment. But I believe if you've proven to be a leader and you've proven to have project management and people management capabilities, you just need to work out the best way to convey that to that type of job. And that's where maybe a quick call to the hiring manager or that recruitment team maybe of use to talk about, I've only got 4 years, how do I find myself in a position to apply for this type of job? And they'll give you insight. We're not
The other
animals.
thing is, if you've got 4 years of management experience, you've probably got 7 to 8 years of total work experience.
Yeah.
That's the point in your career where you should be networking your ass off and not just waiting for job ads.
It's timing also. Unfortunately, we don't get that many senior roles, managerial roles. At the end of the day, we are smallish. A lot of our manufacturing has moved overseas. So networking, as Dave said, and just being patient and then trying to build that relationship with hiring managers and recruiters.
Definitely.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just answering a couple of questions by text as well.
Okay.
Apologies. I know I'm juggling things here. Next time I'll organise to have a moderator to help with the questions. But note, everybody, that on the Q&A you can vote up questions. So if there's anything that you're particularly interested in, you can vote up. Okay. Hiding oh, that's a fun one. Hiding keywords in white text so they're picked up by an algorithm. Does that work?
Well, for us, we don't use AI at all for our process. So it's still the human factor.
Yeah, we trialed it. We didn't like it.
No. So short answer is no. I think we don't use any control F. We use our eyes and our judgment, I guess, still.
Same.
Yeah.
Now, again, we're getting lots of questions, and I can't. Somebody's asked why the assumption that someone senior will leave. It's not an assumption that someone senior will leave. It's the question of, are they the right fit? If they're not the right fit, junior or senior, there's always going to be the risk that they're just not going to stay.
Yes.
Right.
And it has shown a lot of times that they do leave, and our clients have had bad experience, and it's just something they don't want to repeat, unfortunately. As Dave says, it's an investment, and they'd rather get a correct fit.
Yeah. Will you give feedback on an individual application if we asked after a rejection?
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Yes. Every time.
Yeah.
Understand.
Just bring up.
We want you to be successful in life, right? We're all giving our time because we want every person out there to find great jobs quickly, right? So yes, we will absolutely help. Now, I started giving careers lectures back in 2002 because I'm old, because I was working in recruitment and people sucked at doing applications. So I started going out into the world and trying to teach them how to do it better. Yes, we will give you feedback. In fact, for those of you who are in the Careers Development Program, be aware that, we have the this month's training task is to apply for a dummy job at my company. And we are giving tailored individual feedback to each and every applicant. I'm hoping that I might be able to impose on Ivana and Emma to help me screen, because if it gets to be too many, I'm going to
That is amazing. That's a really good exercise.
But yeah, so, and if anybody doesn't have that, you can welcome to contact me. My email is mentoring@raci.org.au, and I will send it to you, and you can apply for a job, and we can give you feedback on that application. But make it a good one. Don't half-ass it. Right? Will the recruiter get back to the applicant if your client is not interested in the application, like a rejection letter? I had the experience that the recruiter reached out to me after the conversation and filled the register. The recruiter never got back to me. All right. The recruiters who don't get back to you suck. Now, I'm willing to bet you that both Emma and Jovana absolutely let every candidate know every time.
We do our best.
Successful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
fact,
so sorry, go.
There you go. Yeah, no, you're right. After you.
I guess there's a rule. If you've applied and I've called you and engaged you in a conversation and asked you to fill out a form and started the process, and then throughout the process we realised that you're not a good fit, then I would definitely come back to you. If I've never called you, never asked you for anything, I probably won't call you because there will be other 100, 200 applicants. It's just the way of life.
Yeah.
You don't get to call everyone. But if I've made contact with you, and then I wouldn't just drop you and leave you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's about mutual respect.
Always. Yeah.
And
yes, sorry, after you.
I was going to say, part of your business model is an awareness of the fact that the candidate of today might be the employer of tomorrow.
100%.
Exactly. Yes. And we actually, it's our company policy to respond via email to every single application. And as Jovana said, at the minute we pick up the phone to speak with somebody, we will follow it up via the phone as well. So again, as Dave said, it's mutual respect. Sometimes we're not perfect, so I'm not going to say I'm 100%, but we always open the door. You've got our mobile numbers, and you're more than welcome to call us back as well.
Right. So somebody's asked, how do you contact for feedback if you don't know who looked at it? Usually there's a name on the email.
All of our ads have names. I'm sure Emma, yours as well. And if there's no name, you just call the company. Whoever picks up will be able to tell you which recruiter is working on a role.
It's also worth noting that if you have had an interview, or if you have had an assessment, what do you call it, like an aptitude assessment, you have a legal right to ask for the results.
Yeah.
Somebody's asked, there's been a lot of talk about being a good fit long term. Is there still hope if we're looking for a more short term position? Hell yeah.
Yeah.
If the jobs need someone short term, then it's the right fit.
Mm.
I mean,
absolutely.
Look, I once hired a guy who was 63 years old to work in a job where I needed somebody who would be diligent, who would be part-time, and who would never want a promotion. Yeah. Now, I knew that this candidate was diligent. I knew that he only wanted to work part-time, and I knew that he would never, ever, ever want to do anything other. He just loved the joy of doing that bit of science. And he worked that job literally to the day he died.
Oh, wow.
Right? So, if you're a good fit, you're a good fit, regardless of any other factors.
Yeah.
Right? And I shouldn't say his age as if that was a detriment, but I'm just saying, part of the reason I knew he was a good fit was because I knew the candidate, and I knew what his ambitions were.
Yeah.
And that's what made him a good fit.
I just saw a question pop up from Dylan. LinkedIn is very important.
Yeah.
I look at it every single time. I look at a resume, then I go onto LinkedIn.
Yeah. So what do you look for?
Consistencies with dates.
Yes. Big one.
Which, is a red flag question that we were, mentioning before. Look, just how they present themselves, how much detail, just a little, their connections, just how interested they're in science, what are they following, things like that, the passion side of things that Emma was saying.
Yeah. I also look for their connections. It tells me a lot about the person. Yeah. Right? Who are you connected with? How many? Are they just other students? Are they academics? Are they people in industry? How actively have you been networking? All of these things tell me a little bit about who you are as a person.
Yeah,
Emma?
definitely. Oh, look, I think anyone that in this day and age, the social media aspects are huge. So you will always be stalked. And I expect that in return. Everything and how you present and how you connect is critical. And I always advise people before you start applying, clean everything up. Make sure you would hire you.
Absolutely. And similarly, clean up your damn social media. Right?
Yes.
I will look at your Facebook page. If it's full of pictures of you wasted on a weekend, I'm not going to hire you because I know you're not going to come to me to work on a Monday. Right? If it's full of racist rants or stuff, anything that is a potential risk, a reputation risk to my business, I will not hire you. Okay. Yeah. I call it anti-social media. Just be nice, people. Now, a phone call. Emma, somebody has taken the trouble. They've researched the position. They've evidently put in a good application. They've taken the trouble in, and you can see it in their resume that they want this job, and they know that they want this job, not a job.
Yes.
Can they call you?
Oh, look, absolutely. We take a lot of calls all the time. A little bit harder now that we're the isolation situation, but still the numbers are there if you need it, when we can answer. So I think if you're genuine and you respect the fact that anyone that you call in this context is probably quite busy, so keep it succinct, prepare what you're going to say, and I think it has the the possibility to dazzle or completely disappoint. So you need to be prepared to dazzle. I've had people call me about a job and I could tell they were passionate. I could tell they were nervous. They forgot to tell me their name. They didn't know the job number or the job title they were applying for. And it was very underwhelming. So I guess my advice is go for it, but have something to say.
Absolutely. But it is an excellent opportunity to show both your enthusiasm and your ability to communicate.
Yeah, but have a question. I get a lot of calls. I'm calling to ask about a job, and they really don't have a question. They just want you to know them and to look at them.
Yes.
And that takes away a lot of your time, where I've already looked at their application and they're not suitable. So you can have those pushy people. So if you are calling, have a true question.
Yes. Yeah. And it can be as simple as, can you tell me if I would be suitable? So my name is so-and-so, I've applied for X job. My skills are this and that. I'm really keen for this opportunity. Can you let me know? Do you feel like I'm suitable? And you'll find the recruiter will talk from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody's asked, should we set LinkedIn to public visibility? Hell yes.
Yes.
And not only that, but before you go to your interview, and we're jumping ahead now, but before you go to your interview, look up the person who's going to interview you on LinkedIn, on public, so that they can see that you've taken the trouble to look them up. Yeah. Show that you're keen. Show that you want this job.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Okay, this has got to be one of my favourite questions. Emma, over the years, what's the worst job application you've ever received?
And
you can go on to the best as well.
Yeah, yeah. So one that sticks in my head was a fellow who applied for a business development role in science. And what he accidentally did was he submitted it with a lot of spelling mistakes. But then he also forgot to get rid of his track changes and his comments that somebody else, which I could tell because the name was different, so somebody else had reviewed his resume for him, and that's what was submitted. And this was a role for 10 plus years experience. And when I sent the email to say you were not successful, he responded as I expected, and then I actually called him to explain because I thought he deserved to know. Fairly blunt truth, so they didn't do it again because, as you say, Dave, we're not in the business of ruining lives, we're in the business of helping people to get a job. So that's probably my worst.
Yamina?
A candidate had a cover letter in a notepad program that said, I'm the best person for this job. And then within the technical skills, they had that they were marinating HPLC, which I'm guessing was supposed to be calibrating. And then, it just went on. I mean, there was so much.
I love that I've more than once had somebody misspell attention to detail.
Yes.
I know.
But my single worst, so I always put my name, my email address, and my contact number on the job ad, and I invite people to call me and talk about the job, right? Mm-hmm. My single worst, somebody text messaged me their LinkedIn thing and said, I'm the best for the job, look me up.
Yeah. Couldn't even bother.
No job application, no nothing. And I texted back, I said, if you're interested in the job, you can send me a resume and cover letter. And he said, no, he said, I don't need to do that. There's my LinkedIn. Look, you can find me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
I can, but I'm not going to.
Wrong mentality. Yeah.
Okay, your best application then. Let's go to the other end of the spectrum.
Oh, Jovana, do you want to?
I don't know. I get really excited when people tell me, the suburb where they live, their technical skills are summarized right at the top that address, what I need from the ad, their education, and then the relevant work experience with their key responsibilities and achievements. And that gets me really excited. So I don't have to sit there and try to figure out what they've studied, what units might they have done, if they were a QC person. Did they do physical, chemistry, analytical? There's no mention of anything. So when people just follow that, this is the ad, I need to answer as much as I can from this ad, even if it's 60, 70%, but when they show that they've actually read it and understood it. Look, I've had many applications like that, and, they just make your day.
Yes, yeah, makes life easier.
Yeah.
I've probably actually in recent times had some very good graduate applications. And you can tell straight away that not only have they researched the job, the selection criteria, the company, me, they've looked at me, as Dave says on LinkedIn, but they've even researched how to write a resume, and I think I saw a comment earlier. You can probably go to either of our company websites, so CS and Evolve, and there'll be something there for you to use. Yeah. So if you're applying to Evolve, try and use Evolve's resources.
Yeah, absolutely. And also bear in mind, if you're still at university, every single university has a career section. You can walk in there with your draft resume and the job ad and say, help me make this application the best possible application for this job.
Yeah, please utilize it. I wish someone told me when I was graduating. I think I applied for 80 jobs before, I started getting interviews, and I never once changed my resume. I had no idea. If you have someone who can help you, call a recruiter, speak to someone at uni, I'm sure they will give you some tips.
Okay, now I've got through a lot of the questions that I wanted to ask, but we've still got so many more. Do you guys mind sticking around for a little bit longer to try and answer some of the people's questions?
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah.
Definitely.
Great. Okay. Right. Well, picking almost at random here. We talk about talk a lot about hiring people for the long term, but most of the advertised positions are either for a few months or a year. How do you justify that? Oh, I can tell you how I justify it, because most of the long-term positions aren't advertised, right? And that's where your network gets involved. People, the short-term jobs, the ones you advertise, are the ones where it's come up suddenly. I need to get it done. I need to get it filled. So I'm going to whack an application, whack an ad out there. Otherwise, I'm going to spend a little time trying to use my network to find the right person.
Yeah, look, there's a few things to that. Most of our clients that say, look, I need a 3-month contract to be filled, or, 12 months, 6 months. A lot of the times it's because they're in a hurry. But the fact is that, 8 out of 10 times they will convert this contract role to a permanent role. So it's almost like a trial period. I think most of the people we put on contract have either stayed longer or they have been made permanent. So if you see a short-term contract, don't think that's a bad thing, unless it specifically says this is a project-related contract that will end, blah, blah. Still go for those jobs.
Definitely.
I see here the $64 million question, and I think we'll hold that one for last. It might be the funnest question to end on. Somebody said the most upvoted at the top. Okay, quite right. There you go. I'm learning all the time.
PhD to industry.
So here we go. Moving from 13 upvotes. Wowee. Moving from academia PhD to industry. Is it possible without having previous industry experience?
Yes. So this is one question I think, particularly with any RACI event that I've been to, is a question I get all the time. I have a lady right now who is in this exact boat. So she was a PhD. She was from overseas. It took her a while to get her PR, to get full-time work. She conveyed herself very well in her application, and I wanted to call her. And it was her personality and her drive, unwavering drive and commitment that made me push on her behalf. Even though some clients will push for that industry experience, that's where recruiters can help. We can advocate on your behalf in your soft skills, and the industry experience is not always the primary focus. So I think it's a really hard thing. It's not easy to do because you're in competition with people with industry experience. So I think people with PhDs, you're amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've been through a huge challenge in life. You can project manage, you can handle stress, you're resilient, use those things to sell yourself, and just don't give up because you didn't. Yeah.
But be realistic. Don't expect that because you've got a PhD that you're suddenly going to get paid more or go into a more senior position, right? That's not going to happen. And don't argue with me about whether or not you're going to be allowed to continue to publish. The answer is no, you're not allowed to continue to publish, and I don't want to spend my life arguing with you about it, right? My IP stays my IP and nobody hears about it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest employer gripes is that issue. Okay. But of course, the other thing is when you're doing a PhD and you've got 3 years of hard but not necessarily completely time-consuming work, use the time to network.
Please network.
Because even at the graduate level, you're far more likely to find a job through a network than you are through an advertised position, right? In the mentoring program, 80% of our students find a job through the network, and most of the rest go to government and academic positions that have to be advertised.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, somebody said, I don't feel like I meet any of the selection criteria on jobs. I did my PhD in a niche area, and I feel like everybody wants you to have studied in a very niche area. I don't feel like anything is applicable. I always say the job application, I'm willing to learn new things, but I feel like they want an expert.
Jovana, did you want
Yes, that can be a problem.
Yeah.
A lot of PhDs means obviously niche. It might just take a lot longer for a suitable job to pop up. Try do something at uni that will expose you to techniques or instruments that are commonly sought after. Your GCs, HPLCs, whatever, risk assessments, SOPs, OH&S, something that will sort of expand that, the skills that are commonly sought after.
Definitely.
And
I think
don't just rely on advertised positions, network.
No, exactly.
Network, yeah.
And I think the slide that Matthias questioned me on, Dave, in Brisbane here, was I compared bachelor to honours to masters to PhD in the context of industry requirements, and that is things like experience, the salary expectation, the passion for science. And unfortunately, sometimes towards the end of a PhD that has been very stressful, your passion can wane a bit. As Dave said, your salary expectation goes through the roof. So if you look at your competition, I guess the message is pull the expectation down to what industry can offer you, and then align that with what you can offer industry. So I believe the legal annual pay salary under the Professional Employees Award for a scientist with a 4-year degree is only $56,000.
Yeah.
So that set the bar and be prepared and say yes and try things, because I've tried with a few PhD candidates and they didn't want anything less than 90. So it's just not realistic. Yeah.
Yeah, and understand that your competition, you're not as a PhD competing against somebody who's got an honours degree. You're competing against someone who's got an honours degree and 3 years of experience.
Yeah.
That's your like for like.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, now I'm not sure we're going to be able to answer this question. In order to land a research position, is it compulsory to have postgrad or PhD studies? That's more an academic question, and I don't feel qualified to answer that.
No, neither. Look, I think one of the key messages is a strong GPA, and have a good reputation with the academic staff and your teaching staff. Really.
Yeah, so for academic roles. But since we've mentioned GPA, once you get out into industry, I don't give a rat's ass what your GPA was,
Never.
right? I care, are you a good fit? Are you entrepreneurial? Are you willing to learn? There's so many things that you can be good at without being great at exams.
Yeah.
At what point do you decide that a particular CV is, or application is worth looking into? Is there a specific section the recruiter go to when they open the job application? Skills?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, technical section, what you've studied. Have some skills. Don't talk about quick learner, pleasant, blah. Talk about what you've learned in a scientific field. That's what I'm looking for, and your past work experience. So I think someone asked, if I'm a graduate and have no industry experience, what am I going to talk about? What are my skills? Well, talk about the practicals that you've done. Have a practical experiment in your undergrad, and if you've used a HPLC, talk in simple terms, explain what skills you've applied. Sample prep, titrations, running of an instrument, analysing. There's so many things you can talk about and build that resume.
Yeah, look, industry experience is really valuable, but it doesn't have to be industry experience. I mean, I had a mentee once ask me, I'm working in a travel agency. How can I possibly talk about that in my resume for scientific jobs? And I said, think about what the skills in being a travel agent are. You've got to have two amazing skills. Number one, you have to be really good at logistics, getting all of the different things to fit together.
Definitely.
And you have to be a really good communicator. You have to be able to understand what the client wants and put together a holiday package for them when even they may not be able to articulate what it is that they want. You have to have a degree of empathy. And those two things, they might not be technical skills, but fuck's sake, they're enormously valuable industry skills.
Yeah, definitely.
And don't forget, we are addressing a criteria for our clients. So there's maybe not necessarily a specific section because you're all unique, but as Jovana said, there's technical aspects. So we may skim to at least tick the box. If our client says must have a Bachelor of Chemistry, then if you don't have a Bachelor of Chemistry, we cannot submit you. So that's an immediate. So we might go, look, skim for that. Then the next criteria that our client has said. So there might be 3 or 4. We'll run through the resumes and then we'll go back and read in more detail. So it can be very dependent. Yeah.
And that brings neatly the next, how do you address the selection criteria in your resume? Are just keywords, relevant work, education experience? I mean,
yeah, so throughout your past roles, so if you've done an honours degree and it asks again, here I go again, HPLC, GC, just because it's so common. Talk about, what you've tested, what experiments have you run. So you're addressing the selection criteria by talking about what you did in your honours degree. Don't just give me the title. I have no idea. I'm not an expert in every area of the chemistry. So tell me about it. Talk about what subjects you did in your undergrad. Maybe you've had a placement, maybe you've had some work experience. So use those roles to answer the selection criteria. If you project managed, if you, dealt with SDSs, with chemicals, anything, that will show less obvious things.
Yeah. Now, somebody has asked, how important is local experience?
This is an interesting one. We have,
Yeah,
sorry,
go.
No, I was going to say, one of the key criteria when the local experience comes into play for us is something like NATA experience or exposure to. So if I ask you, do you know what NATA is, and you say no, you haven't put the effort in to understand the local requirements. I've had people from all over the world who have said, yes, I know what it is, and in my country, this is the NATA equivalent. And that's been great. That's probably one of the issues I have with the comparison of local versus international experience.
Yeah, look, some clients will not mind at all, whereas others will be specific because the role is busy, people need to hit the ground running, they need to understand, how to deal with NATA or TGA or similar. So sometimes that's just a selection criteria we can't fight against.
Yeah.
Sad truth, experience is highly regarded compared to those who don't have it. I've learnt this the hard way through rejection emails. What advice would you give someone to be more competitive? You just got to try and get some experience. I mean, whether it's volunteering, I hate unpaid internships. I have a particular passion against them, but sometimes they're the right fit. Rarely. You just got to go out there. I mean, even if it's volunteering at your university, say in the lab, can I help the lab techs with some of their work, and just, and learn how to maintain the instruments. What fabulous experience that is, right?
Fabulous. And, call small companies, call, medium and small size private companies and target them yourself and just, offer to do some days, some hours. You don't have to go through a recruiter, but try get some experience wherever you can.
And look for the opportunities such as, darn it, Ivana, I've forgotten the name of your program again. What's it called?
UniWorks.
UniWorks. There we go. Sorry. Things like UniWorks, they're out there trying to help you. I mean, I'll say personally, as an employer, I don't take people on for unpaid work. I have a belief that if you're going to work for me, you get paid. And
that was our, same.
Yeah.
So it does mean that I turn a lot of people down who offer to work for me for free, but people's time has value.
Exactly. And I think that one thing we forget is when you're so honed in on just applying for jobs, you don't go and consult those people that you've built relationships with. So, for example, I'm a live example of somebody that got a job at the pub because I ran into somebody from high school that I hadn't seen in 6 years, and she said, "Do you want a job? What are you up to? Do you want a job?" And I said, "Yes." So it can be the most unusual contact. Get it out there, connect with people. Make sure that your status is looking for new opportunities. Be approachable, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Now, somebody's asked what's the best way to make your CV while you're still at university. Look, a university CV is going to be a university CV in the sense we're not expecting you to have 10 years of experience, right? So it's going to be, I was about to say age appropriate, but there's probably a better terminology for that. And you've got a career section to help you do it.
Yeah, you can put so many things, web chemistry, physical chemistry, sample prep, particle size, viscosity, titrations. Just start writing things down as you go to help you build your technical section.
But if you're going to put it there, make sure you actually know what the hell you're talking about.
Oh, yeah, because I will ask you how to do titration, to explain what the instrument is, how to use it. But as Dave said, if you put it there, you need to know how to explain it.
And I'll say that same for hobbies, right? Now, when you put hobbies in a resume, the purpose of the hobbies is just to give us a chance to break the interview mold and talk to you as a human being.
Yeah.
So for God's sake, don't put in a hobby like, oh, I like to play tennis. Or when did you last play tennis? Oh, 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's just killed the conversation, right? Or I like to read. Great. What do you like to read? Be prepared to answer that question.
Yeah. I think one piece of advice that I give to students, and I wish I had this, is if you go to a practical lesson, and we all do as scientists, create a master file of your skills from day one. And if you just write down 2 or 3 of those at every prac that you go to, and it might have been math, it might have been titrations, it might have been serial dilutions, making a buffer, doesn't matter, it's a skill. And then 2-3 years down the track when you're writing your professional resume, it's going to be so easy because it's all there and you wrote it. So all you have to do is refresh your brain on what that looks like.
100%.
Yeah.
Now, there's a couple of questions on, call it guidelines, templates on writing cover letters and resumes, and I'm just going to answer them by saying there's no such thing, right? Everyone is individual. There's no right, there's no wrong. It's just a case of...
But more than one page and lots of white space, like, nice margins. I don't want my eyes to hurt.
Yeah, make it readable, absolutely.
And I think a lot of, going back to even the marketing question, some of us spend a lot of time on making it look pretty. But we're scientists, we're pretty black and white. We're all about, content. We just want to know, are you, aren't you? So if I have any advice, it's lay off making it look pretty and invest in the value of the content. So don't kill yourself on the looks.
But then a fair question is, how, I've got the experience that I've got. How do I tailor my resume to a job?
Read the ad and hit those 10 points that are in the ad. If you've done them, you address them where you have done them.
Yeah. And you can change the flavour of how you describe a job.
Yeah. And to suit the ad. So Jovana even touched on it earlier, is that Some of us sit in a bubble and we type our application and we never leave the bubble, and then we go, oh yes, ready to submit. The best thing you can do is get out of the bubble. As Dave said, record yourself, maybe use the language, but also seek advice, seek criticism. Go to somebody that knows you well, that you trust, and ask for the harshest criticism possible. Ask them if they would hire you. Ask them to rip it apart. And then by the time you apply, you've got the best version possible.
It's also worth, particularly with your cover letter, print it out, stand there and read it out loud. If you can't read it without either stumbling or running out of breath, I can't either. Okay. Now we're getting up to 8 o'clock, so I'm reluctant to take too much more of your time. I'm just going to see if there's any other. What role does congeniality have in distinguished applicants? Oh, I love that. A great deal. We scientists, we're not individuals in our ivory towers cackling madly and plotting the downfall of mankind. Now we pack whole teams of scientists into the ivory towers, and they all have to work together. So congeniality is a factor.
Yeah, definitely.
And communications is a factor. Okay. So I think I'll skip now to the $64 million question. Oh, hang on, just before I do, where's the best place to network as a student at university, especially now with COVID-19? Just letting everybody know, we are running a trial online networking session next week. If that works, we will start running probably fortnightly online networking, which will be effectively like a form of speed dating, and we encourage you guys to participate. We will link you with experienced scientists and give you a chance to network.
Network on LinkedIn now.
Okay. And I can't find the $64 million question, but it basically says, are there any jobs left in the era of COVID?
Yes, government jobs, definitely. Pharmaceutical manufacturing, food manufacturing, cleaning chemicals manufacturing. So there's hope.
Absolutely.
There is hope. There is always hope, people. No matter how bleak it looks. This is a fundamental truism of the recruitment process. If you know what you're doing and if you put the effort in, a great candidate can always find a job no matter how crappy the market is.
Yeah. And we had, so in the past month, some of our key manufacturers, nutraceutical, pharmaceutical, they've taken on about 14 or 15 people in all different areas, and it might be short term. So the nature of the job might be bit different, short term, couple of weeks, maybe more, but it's not the time to be picky. It's the time to say yes, give things a go, don't be scared. Everyone's taking the right precautions, and that's going to show your willingness to give things a go. And again, that's a great quality that employers want for when all of this.
No such thing as wasted experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can explain a 2-week contract on your resume. You can, if your recruiter supports you, you can put your recruiter as a referee or ask for a statement on that contract. We're happy to help. We don't just dump and run. We're here for the long run, not the short term.
Absolutely. Okay, so we have many more questions than we can possibly get to tonight. I apologise to everybody whose question has gone unanswered, but now we do have a careers blog, and we also have a student blog on our careers section. If you have questions that you would like us to follow up with, then by all means send them in. We'll put some blog posts up. Right?
Definitely, and feel free to reach out to us, to me, via LinkedIn or email. You can find our contact details. If you've got some real problems and you're unsure of your resume, we're more than happy to help you now.
Exactly. So Jovana is based in Victoria, but you are nationwide as well, and I'm based in Brisbane, and our company is also nationwide. So I think at max there was about 120 odd people in this webinar, so I would love to see 118 people add me on LinkedIn if you're not already, excluding Dave and most likely one other. But
I think we're already linked on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Okay. So to wrap up, tonight has been another event as part of the RACI Careers Development Program. Through webinars, networking events, mentoring, lectures and workshops, the RACI Careers Development Program aims to help graduating students get the best possible start in their careers. In the meantime, I'd like to thank both of our presenters tonight, Jovana Sobat and Emma Chung. And I'd also like to thank our sponsors, Envirolab, Laboratory Credit Union, and DCS Technical. Thank you, everybody. I'm thrilled with tonight, and a recording of this will be going onto YouTube in the very near future.
Thank you.
Dave, and thanks everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Dave. Thank you.
Okay.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.